Welcome back! Now for this challenge, I purposely designed the criteria to try to push you into using certain methods to complete it. If however you were able to apply the effect in a different way, then that's absolutely fine. Whilst you may miss out on a few points, the important thing is that you were able to apply the effect successfully. But now let's take a look at how this challenge could have been completed. So starting in FMOD as always, we're first going to open up the mixer window. In the mixer window, we're going to select the music group bus in the routing tab. And we're then going to add FMOD's low pass filter effect to the effect chain. So we're going to select add effect, and we're then going to click FMOD deprecated and select FMOD low pass. Now you could of course use FMOD's free band EQ like we did for the sound effects bus in our snapshots lesson. It's up to you. We're then going to turn the frequency dial all the way up on our low pass filter effect just to make sure that our music isn't filtered once the game first starts. Next, we're going to open up our snapshots tab and we'll create a new overriding snapshot which we'll call pause menu filter. And then with the snapshot selected and highlighted yellow, we're going to select our music bus, then click on the frequency cutoff dial in order to scope it in, and then we'll turn it down to about 1 kHz. So now when this music is told to play inside of our game, the filter effect will be applied to our music. Now if you like, you can even test this in FMOD before you implement it. If you go back to the event editor window and select your music event, then tell it to play, then return back to the mixer window and tell your snapshot to play, you should hear the effect applied. The final thing for us to do in FMOD is to give the snapshot a tiny fade using an AHDSR modulator. To do that, we're going to right-click the snapshot's intensity dial and we're going to select Add Modulation, AHDSR. Then just adjust the attack and the release settings to anywhere between about 20 to 100 milliseconds. It's up to you. Once that's done, we can build our banks, save our script as always, and jump back into Unity. Now for this challenge, we won't be creating our own script, but instead editing a script that is attached to the menu canvas object. So what we'll do is go straight to the hierarchy tab and select the object, and then find the script called Start UI attached to it in the Inspector tab. Once found, right-click it and select Edit Script. So seeing as this script is completely new to us, it's worth taking some time to get to know a little bit about it and how it works. The first thing we can take note of straight away is the variables that have been created and declared inside the class. We've got a lot of game object reference variables that have been named after other canvas objects that can be accessed through the pause menu by the player. Now we learnt in our buses lessons that the canvases that make up the pause menu, such as the audio and options canvases, are all disabled when the player first enters the level or starts the game, but are then enabled when they open the pause menu and select a certain canvas. Therefore, these objects are likely to be told to enable or disable themselves from this script when appropriate. Now we can also see a boolean called m_in_pause. Now remember, just like how the menu can only ever be open or closed, a boolean can only ever be true or false. So it'd make a little bit of sense then for this boolean to have some control over the pause menu and when it is and isn't opened. Now in the start function we can see another boolean. This one is called always display mouse and it's being checked in an if statement to see when it's false. We can then see the results of if it's ever set to true or false, each of which look like they lock or unlock the mouse cursor to the screen. Scrolling down slightly now, we'll find a few public functions most likely being controlled from other scripts. If we take a quick look at the exit pause function, we can see the m_inPause boolean being set to true, but also a function called switch pause state being called. Now it's a little bit odd that a function called exit pause is telling a boolean called inPause to be set to true. You'd expect it to be set to false if the pause menu is being exited, so maybe this function has something to do with that. Now as we know, double clicking on a function name highlights any other references to it in this script, and we can even see it is being declared at the very bottom here. Now, if we take a look right at the very bottom of said function, we can see all of those variables containing references to other pause menu canvases being set. We can also see our in-pause boolean being set to false once everything else within the function has been completed, when the boolean still remains true. So it's possible then that this function has more control over the activation and deactivation of the pause menu. Now from here, we can start doing some testing to see what's going on in this script when the pause menu is opened and closed. Now you may have already done this, but I'm going to edit this script by adding two debug.log commands. The first one I'm going to add is to the update function. So I'm going to tell it to send me the value of the in-pause boolean variable inside my console tab whilst I'm playing the game. Then I can open and close the pause menu to see how it reacts. And just as I thought, it's set to true when the menu is open and false when it's closed. Next, I'm going to cut it from the update function, and I'm actually going to paste it inside the switch pause state function twice. One at the very beginning of the function, and one at the very end. And this is to simply see if there is a difference in the boolean value, and this might determine where we'll be writing our code. To separate them, I'm going to add two strings to each of them. One will say top. Once I've done that, the other will say bottom. And now both debug.log commands are labeled, so we'll be able to tell which one is producing which value of the boolean. So now, if we open up the pause menu, we can see that our boolean, when the function is first triggered, starts at false. However, by the end of it, it's switched to true. Now this is very useful information for us to know, as it tells us that if we want to link our snapshots to the in-pause boolean, we'll need to write code to do it at the bottom of the function. So let's quickly remove these two debug.log commands and look at how we can start editing our script to include our snapshot. The first thing we're going to do is make things easier for ourselves by adding our two FMOD namespaces. Next, let's add our snapshot. Now, as we learned about in our snapshot lesson, we need to treat them as if they were an FMOD event. So inside our class, we will create an event instance, and we'll call it ss underscore game pause, with the ss standing for snapshot. And inside our start function, we'll then assign our variable to the specific snapshot we created earlier. Now don't forget, when writing the path to the snapshot, that you write snapshot instead of event at the beginning. We'll then move all the way down to our function, switch pause state, and at the very bottom of it, right underneath the setting of the boolean, we're going to write an if statement. Now in this if statement, we're going to check to see if the in-pause boolean is true. So let's write its name. Now if it is true, we'll want to tell our new snapshot to begin. Else, if the boolean is ever false, we want to tell our snapshot to stop. We also want to set the stop mode to allow fade out in order to allow our AHDSR modulator to fade it out. And we'll also obviously need to make sure that the instance of the snapshot is destroyed when the player exits the level. So underneath the function, we'll quickly create an onDestroy function, and we'll set the snapshot to release. With that, we can save our script and test out our pause menu. So now if we pause our game, we hear the music filter applied. We can then navigate ourselves around the options in the pause menu. We can make any changes to our audio if we like. And then if we close the pause menu, the filter effect dissipates. Now it's time to look at the bonus criteria set and see how we could have done this using playback states as well. Now instead of checking the boolean to see if the pause menu has been opened or closed, we can use playback states to check whenever the switch pause state function has been called if the snapshot is currently playing or not. First, we need a playback state variable. So at the top of our script inside of our class, we'll declare our variable and we'll call it PB for short. Let's then come down to the switch pause state function, cut our if and else statements from it, and then scroll to the top of the function and paste them back in. Now, before the if statement is checked, we're going to get the playback state of our snapshot and output the result into our PB variable. So let's write the name of our event instance variable containing the snapshot, and we'll use the command get playback state to output it into PB. So now every time this function is called when the player opens or closes the pause menu, we'll collect whichever playback state our snapshot is currently set to then update and store it inside the PB variable. Then inside of the if statement, we'll change the condition. We're now going to check every time this function is called if the PB variable is anything but playing. So to do that, we write PB does not match playback state dot playing. So if this function is now called and our snapshot is not playing, that suggests to us that the player must have gone from playing the game to opening the pause menu. Therefore, we need to tell our snapshot to play, which is what our if statement will do. If this function is called and the snapshot is currently playing, that suggests that the player has gone from being inside the pause menu to closing it and is now back in the game. Therefore, our else statement will check for this and tell our snapshot to stop. And just like that, you've utilized playback states in your script. So that was everything. I hope you did well with this one. It may have seemed a little bit of a complicated challenge at first, but in the end, turned out to be quite a simple process. And with that done, you've now completed the final challenge. Hopefully these challenges have highlighted any areas of implementing audio with FMOD and Unity that you're both good at, and areas that you're also struggling with slightly as well. If you wish to improve your skills even more, I'd suggest looking over the criteria points that you missed out on, if any, and go back over some of the lessons that covered them. If after rewatching the lessons you're still struggling, then you're more than welcome to email me, henry@scottgamesounds.com, and I'll be happy to go over the issue with you. Thanks again for taking part, and I hope you've enjoyed the course.